Hey there, this is our latest video from the Salt. Thank you for checking it out. We are disciples making disciples. And in this video, we're trying out a new format. We open up with a story about how me climbing through a jungle gym with the faint aroma of urine and feces actually brings me closer to God. How that pertains to, as we're reading through the Sermon on the Mount, chapters 5 through 7, the book of Matthew, how we can dissect those lessons into a 5-step process into growing as disciples. We answer the question of the week when it pertains to faith, and then we finish up with our leadership lesson, understanding how Scripture can help us lead our teams, our families, and others closer to God and living in His likeness. So if you like what you see, go ahead and follow or subscribe, and leave any comments if you have any questions or would like to see any different type of content. So we look forward to it. Enjoy the video. Stay salty. Let's go ahead and dive in. So I want to start off by just a story that kind of happened this week, which is we're staying in the very farthest northwest part of the country, in a small town right outside of Blaine, Washington, which is right on the border of Canada, right? We even went up and visited Canada for a little bit, but it's beautiful over here. You know, it's a great time of year to come over here. The weather's starting to change, and it's right on the ocean in a bay area. And but a little bit south, we traveled down to Bellingham for a day, and we went to this cool place. There was a little playland with an indoor jungle gym for the kids. It was a rainy day, and man, it was fun. There wasn't a lot of people there, so we got to kind of go in there and climb in the jungle gym with them. The kids were loving it. Jack, my oldest boy, he was wanted to teach me, is what he was saying, and which was he wanted to lead me through the jungle gym and show me how to get through and all the different parts he had climbed through. And it was just a lot of fun because it was kind of like reliving a childhood a little bit, you know. And I think that's one of the best parts of parenting, is that you get to re-experience your childhood, and you got to now get to see it from the lens of the parent, and you get to watch them experience joy for as they do things for the first time. This is the first time they've been in a jungle gym like this, so it was just like a whole brand new world to them. And it just brings me back to the times when I used to climb through these things, and it was just there's so much freedom in it. You know, it's a lot harder to get through it now. You know, you barely fit through it, but you know, it's fun and it's exciting. And you know, it brought me to really Matthew 18:3, where Jesus talks about having a childlike faith. He says you have to be like children if you wish to enter into the kingdom of God. And you know, there's many ways to interpret this. There's many ways to look at it. But when I think about that, I think that, you know, a childlike faith is when you look at a child, they're excited about things. They're naive to kind of the ways of the world, and everything to them is new. They're experiencing things through a new lens, and so they're explorers, they're adventurers, they're just they run around and they have fun with their environment. Yet they enjoy and they need and they thrive within parameters. They need their parents to structure things for them, right? When they get hurt on the playground, when there's a kid bullying them, or there's some sort of scuffle, or there's some sort of disagreement, who do they come running to? They come running to their parents. And that's our relationship with God, right? We look to God as our guidance, as our source of life, as the provider of everything we need to live and survive. But then he looks at us in just awe as he watches us explore and create and just our versions of play here in the world. So I think that's what a childlike faith really is. Now, earlier in Matthew is the Sermon on the Mount, which is verses 5 through 7. And within those verses, I've kind of distilled it down into a 5-part framework for discipleship, right? If you've never heard of discipleship, or you're not quite sure what that is, simply put, is discipleship is growing more in like your teacher. So living your life to become more like who you are following. In this case, discipleship, or Christian discipleship, is to become more like Christ. So disciples back in the day when Jesus was out there preaching were people who lived in community with them. They lived the day-to-day life with them. They woke up, they ate breakfast together, they slept at camps together, they traveled together, they did all these things, and they experienced who Jesus was through and through. They lived their life with him, and they get to see the type of character he had, the way he went about things, and they molded their lives to become more like him. We are to do the same thing. Yet oftentimes when people begin their faith journey, or they're curious about who Jesus is, it's kind of confusing, right? There's a lot of steps. They don't know where to do it. They've maybe never opened the Bible before, barely looked into it. And they're like, oh, where do I go? You know, that's where I was at. And so this framework is not to encompass everything. Discipleship is a lifelong journey, and you're going to have to explore it and learn the nuances of it day in and day out. But a framework can help. It can help get the ball rolling and help get people moving in the right direction. So as you read the Sermon on the Mount, it'll become apparent that these instructions, these teachings that he has for us, distill down into these 5 categories. So those 5 categories are submission, service, sacrifice, suffering, and then all of that happens through a process of self-denial. I've got an image of this on my website, on the SALT, on our latest article. So just go check that out. You'll be able to find that there, or I've posted on my social media, Joshua J. Clark. So anyways, over the next coming weeks, we're going to explore this process in depth. But the first one I want to focus on is submission. That's the first step that someone takes when they want to become a disciple of Jesus, right? It takes submitting to Jesus, to God, to be able to follow him. That means taking your focus off yourself, removing the focus on your life and what your desires are and all of that, and saying, okay, I'm placing that into God's hands. I'm relinquishing control, and I'm going to give that control to God. This is difficult, especially in today's day and age where we all want and desire to have control over our lives. That was me before I knew Jesus, right? Anybody who knows me for some years knows that I'm probably not the first person that comes to mind when they think about Jesus, right? I did not grow up in the faith, and I definitely did not live a Christian life for most of my life. You know, my childhood was chaotic. There was a lot of stuff going on. And because of that, it kind of built up a lot of bad habits, a lot of bad perspectives on the world, and just really, and I lived life for myself. And so I tried to find happiness, pleasure through any means, like many means necessary. And it led me down a path of destruction. I remember being very depressed and just at a point where I was lost and had no idea where to go. I was at rock bottom. And I remember one night in my, around probably 20 years old, I was laying in bed, just 3 o'clock in the morning. This was not an irregular occurrence where I would just wake in bed and just think, what is the purpose of life? Not able to sleep at all, not a wink. The whole night, just staying awake, being like, what is this all about? And just being so lost. And, I'd gone to one or two church services when I was a kid. And, I believed there was a God, but I didn't quite know what God was or what it meant to me, really. And I just really didn't think much about it. And so, but I would pray almost every night, just not really knowing why. And I just remember that night just praying, okay, God, you know what? I give up. I give up having control over this. If you're real, show yourself to me. If you are real, please just let me see what it is. And sure and behold, he made himself visible. Not that he wasn't visible the whole time. It's just I wasn't willing to open my eyes to him. I wasn't willing to see him. Finally, when I let go of control, I began to see God in the world. I found relationships in my life that helped point me to God. I started learning things and reading things that brought me closer and closer to God. When I look back there, I see a lost, broken, depressed person who is just doing whatever could fill that void. I was placing my hope in relationships that would never fulfill. I put my self-worth on my education. And I chased after the pleasures of the world that just didn't fulfill anything in my life and actually brought me deeper and deeper into a hole. But now I look at my life and I can just see the workings of God, right? I have a beautiful family. I have a beautiful wife, 3 wonderful children. God has brought me through a doctorate's program that I'm going to be finished up in a year. And I get to travel the world in an RV and explore God's nature. And it's just phenomenal because none of that had anything to do with me. When I was doing everything my way, I was up late at night, depressed, wondering what the purpose of this all was. But once I submitted to God, once I gave myself finally up, and said, okay, I'm not figuring this out. Finally, things started to shift. And it's not an overnight process. It's not like all of a sudden woke up and was like, oh, let's start doing everything right. No, it's like, it takes time, and that's the point of discipleship, is you grow more and more like Christ. You start to shed away those parts of yourself that aren't healthy. You start to shed away the parts that don't bring you closer to God. And over time, you grow closer and closer to him. And year after year, I've watched just more and more beauty enter into my life. Even though I faced harder and harder challenges along the way, I feel like, to kind of overcome some of those things because of God only. And I have confidence that it was only God that brought me through that. And so when we submit to God, it's saying, I give you that control, you take it. And once you do that, it lays the foundation for these other steps that we'll explore in the next coming weeks. So over this week, I just ask yourself to kind of think about that. Ask yourself, have you really fully committed yourself to God? And if you haven't, what's stopping you? What's getting in the way? Are you chasing after the career? Are you trying to build your legacy? Do you not believe in God because you just don't feel like it makes logical sense? Are there relationships in your life that are preventing that from happening? I ask you to consider that. So now I want to break off into a couple other things just to kind of touch on what this means in our life, right? I want to take a question on faith, which is, just a question that many of us have, that, what does it mean in our life? And so the question I want to address today is, okay, let's say I believe in God, but I don't know if I believe in Jesus. How should I go about this? Well, God doesn't expect you to have all the answers. God doesn't expect you not to have any questions. God doesn't expect you to have any doubts. And so I think if you come about this in an honest way and think, okay, what is it that I find hard or difficult to believe? What is it? What are those things that kind of prevent it from me? Is it because I can't physically see him with my eyes? Is it because I don't feel the presence in my life? Is it because I don't like the teachings of the Bible? Well, ask those things and be honest with it. Then address what those roadblocks are and just kind of look into it. Be like, okay, what is it? Like, let me dive a little further into it. And I believe as you grow closer into that research, because this is the exact steps I took, right? I had lots of questions. I had lots of doubts. But the more I looked into it, the more I realized I didn't actually think about these things. They were just roadblocks I had up in my life. And the more I looked into it from both perspectives, the more God started to make sense. The more Jesus started to make sense. And so if you have that question of, I believe in something, but I'm just not quite sure what it is, and you're not happy with where your life is, dive into it a little bit deeper. Think about what those roadblocks are. Next one is I want to talk about a leadership lesson for this. What does this mean in our lives? How can we lead our families better? How can we lead our teams better? How can we lead our organizations better? Right? Because the whole point of discipleship is not only that you grow within yourself, but that you're helping others grow too. So I think the big lesson in this is priorities, right? When you're submitting to God, you're getting your priorities in check, and leaders need to have priorities. Because here's the thing, there's going to be a lot of things on your plate that you have to tend to, but some are more important than others, right? There's going to be a lot of urgent matters in our lives. Hey, I need this, this needs to happen. But what's most important? Because if you focused on everything, then nothing is important. So, first priority in our life is God. God needs to be first in our life. If God is not at the pillar and not on the foundation, then everything else will crumble. When we put God first, we're recognizing that he created this world, and now we get to live within that and discover what that is so we could live more in harmony with him. We're no longer going to be swimming upstream, but we'll join him in his current, in his direction. Number 2 is going to be our spouses. After God goes our relationship with our spouse. If we don't have a right relationship with God, we're not going to treat our spouse right. And if we aren't on the same page as our husband or as our wife, then we are going to crumble, right? When me and my wife are not in harmony, the rest of our life is difficult. And so our relationships come priority over everything else besides God. Third, it's going to be our kids. Now, to some of you, this might feel harsh, right? How dare you put your relationship over your kids? But it's like the airplane metaphor, right? You got to put the mask on yourself before you could put the mask on the kids. Because if you pass out during a car crash, airplane crash, then how are you going to be able to help anybody else? So it's important that you take care of yourself, take care of your marriage first, or else the rest will crumble. It's going to be very difficult for you to be able to parent if you and your spouse are not on the same page. After that, number 4 is going to come your calling or your career. This is the place that God has put on your heart, that the work you are here to do. This could be tending to the house. This could be tending to running your business. This could be teaching. It could be whatever your work here on earth is to do, comes after your immediate family. If your family is not in check, then your advancing in your career is not going to help that. You may get a promotion at work, but it may add more stress, and the rest of your family starts to suffer because of that. We need to have our priorities in check, or else our life falls out of balance. 5. After that comes our extended network. So our extended family, like our parents, our siblings, or it could be our friends, or it could be cousins. It's our distant, it's our network of people around us, our community, our church. That all comes after your calling. After that, then everything else falls. So your hobbies, your travel, your experiences that you want to have, those are all great, but those need to fall into place, right? If one of the other priorities are out of check, then you're not going to be able to enjoy that vacation you're on. If your marriage is in shambles and you go on a vacation, you're not going to be enjoying that to the fullest ability. If you're not seeing your kids or spending time with them, but you're out enjoying your hobbies, well, your life is not going to look very balanced, and it's not going to feel very balanced either. So it's important that we have these priorities, and the same thing goes for leadership. If you don't have your priorities in check, you're not going to be able to lead others. So that's our leadership lesson for the week. I hope you enjoyed this new format that we've gone about. Hope you enjoyed this new content. If there's anything that you'd like to see that wasn't talked about, or you would like discussed in further detail, I ask that you reach out to me. Leave it in the comments. Send me an email. Whatever it is, just get in contact, because I would love to bring it up next time. As always, stay salty.